Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome to a new video. This is Siavash from Az-Zamman Airlines, and here before. In a lot of videos that we had, especially from Mr. Bede, it was suggested that electoral college in the United States should be changed, especially since the 2016 presidential election went to the Republican nominee, even though he did not win the popular vote. He lost the popular vote. Donald Trump, who is the current president, won 46.1% of the popular vote, compared to his opponent, Hillary Clinton, former First Lady, winning 48.2%. And people are wondering if gerrymandering didn't exist and we had a more balanced system, whether Hillary Clinton would have won the election because of the popular vote. Similar issues was also raised in 2020 presidential election and the 2024 presidential election. So based on that, I tried to get the census from the last US census that we had in the state and compare that to the population they have and change some numbers around. Just so disclaimers, I'm not proposing that this should actually happen in the United States. It's just I think it's a fine thing to happen and see where the states will get electoral votes more and which state will be the least compared to what they have now in the state, especially since Mr. Bede did a very interesting scenario that when the electoral votes were first proposed, there were only around 30,000 people or citizens being represented by a congressman or congresswoman, but now it's around 700,000 people. The data was acquired from the United States Census. And again, this is also to show you how to work with data and how to use data, as you see online or anywhere else. I use data.census.gov to find the export tables option and use the first table given by the essential census to see the amount of people living in each state. First information, when you see the census also contains people living in U.S. territories, especially Puerto Rico, which has 4 million people population. For the purpose of this video, and since Puerto Rico does not give electoral votes to the presidential election, we are going to exclude Puerto Rico from our analysis. I'm only going to use all remaining United States states. However, even though I am excluding Puerto Rico, I'm not excluding District of Columbia. Even though District of Columbia is not a state, however, with the 700,000 people, still gives some electoral votes to our presidential election. With that mind said, I created an Excel table from the data that we had, going around and remove Puerto Rico from the table and the discussion. As we can see, I also included the electoral college that each state currently represents in a presidential election. Like Alabama, it has 9. Alaska gives 3, and so on and so forth, especially for California giving 54 electoral votes. First thing that we do in this map, we are going to remove the amount of senators that the states get to get their electoral college, which is 2. Each state will give 2 senators to the electoral vote or go to the country senate in order to have an equal representation without including the population. That means the remaining electoral votes comes from the United States Congress or House of Representatives. By doing so, we can see the number shrinks a little bit. California becomes 52. Alaska, who has 3, goes down to 1. That means there's only 1 congressman currently right now representing Alaska, since Mary Peltola lost her seat to the Republicans. Alabama is represented by 7, Arizona 9, and so on and so forth. Also, what I tried to figure out that based on the electoral vote each state has right now, and based on the electoral vote that is represented in the Congress, how many congressmen and congresswomen represent how many people in that state. For example, Alabama, for each representative, you get 720,000 roughly people being represented by one congressman or congresswoman. Alaska has 733,000 people, and all the population of Alaska is only represented by one Congress representative. Arizona, similar numbers. Numbers do not really change until you hit California, which seems 760,000 people are represented by each member of Congress that is represented in the United States House of Representatives from the state of California. And we also see that Delaware, even though it has 989,000 people, is only represented in the House of Representatives by one Congress representative. Similar issues also go on to be the case. For example, I believe Wyoming is one of them as well. We look at, or South Dakota here, 800,000 people. And Wyoming. No, Wyoming is actually not that bad. Never mind. Then what I tried to do, using the number that Mr. B proposed, 30,000 people, which it used to be the beginning of the United States representation on how people are going to get representative based on the number of people that are living in that state, by 30,000 people, and we're going to divide the total people that the state has by the 30,000 people to see how many electoral vote should be given to the state based on representation of 30,000 people each congressman or congresswoman. And the number below electoral college counted is going to give us that number using the population of the state divided by 30,000 people to see what's going on. You will see these colors also between those two numbers, red, purple, and blue. This is just to see how Democratic, Republican, or swing state these states are. For example, Arizona is purple, or Georgia, for example. But the rest, for example, California is blue, Arkansas is red, so on and so forth. Then you're going to round those numbers just to make it be a perfect number. And usually what I do, I use the same rule of rounding. If it's close to the next number, I round it up. If it's not close to that number and it's lower, I round it down. Great example of this is the state of Florida. The state of Florida only has around 717 electoral votes if you divide it by 30,000. But since it's 0.9, it's going to be 718 rounded that number. Now looking at the state of Colorado, which is 192.4, you're only going to give Colorado 192. Then we already removed the senators that gives the electoral college to each state. We have to put those numbers back now because we already removed it before doing this calculation. So we are going to award electoral college and bring the 2 senators back to make everything equal. This gives a set amount of numbers of how each state will be represented in the House of Representatives. For example, the District of Columbia is represented by 25 electoral votes. Anyone wins it, it's an automatic 25. Anyone that wins the state of Hawaii will get 51. Idaho 63. As it moves on. Then we are going to sum all the numbers of the electoral college that is given to each state and see how many electoral college is at the stake by adding those electoral college awarded based on the 30,000 people representation and the 2 senators. And you get to the magical number 11,146 electoral college votes. And based on that, you also have to find what number would give the presidential candidate the majority to win the White House. Because it's no longer going to be 270. It has to be a bigger number if it's 11,000. And that magical number happens to be 5,574 electoral votes at the stake. Then what I tried to do, using the actual results based on the current electoral college, compare this to how if each of these candidates, when the states as it moved on, would have changed the outcome of the presidential election. You're looking, for example, in the 2024 presidential election between Donald Trump of the state of Florida and Kamala Harris of the state of California, and see if we now change this around, would have changed the outcome of the election. It appears they would not have changed the outcome of the election. Donald Trump would have acquired 6,425 electoral votes, securing the White House. Kamala Harris of the state of California would have only acquired 4,721 electoral votes, a difference of 1,704. Many people may say because of that difference, it might be called a landslide election. However, you should know, even though the difference is 1,700, in this type of election, there's only need of one state to flip. Because a state such as California, who gives about 1,300 electoral votes, can change the election. Because if that state is flipped, they can just give the presidency to someone else. I also tried that scenario in case to say, okay, well, we talked about California, but California was won by a Democratic nominee. Let's just take a look. Let's say the state of Texas, which a lot of Democrats, a lot of polling say, oh, it might be underplayed. You're gonna talk about it. It might go blue, which it didn't. They acquired by 40 points. However, let's say if Texas went blue and went Democratic. Would have changed in this scenario the outcome of the election? It would. Because Donald Trump will go from 6,400 to 5,400, 5,451. That means he's not going to claim majority anymore because he lost Texas. At the same time, Harris, who you now see in this scenario that she won Texas and Texas went blue, she's going to hit 5,695, barely claiming the majority, which is 5,500. So she's going to get 5,600, while the majority is 5,500. So she's going to win the presidency by a narrow margin, 244. However, she can win it. So this number, 1,700, don't think is a lot. In this type of system that we made, that the states can have a little bit higher electoral votes based on the people, everything can change by one state being flipped. Same in 2020. When you're looking at this number, despite whatever happened, you see that Joe Biden would have won in this system 6,344 electoral votes, compared to his opponent, Donald Trump, winning 4,750, a difference of just 1,500 votes. Closer election than 2020. However, let's say in this scenario, Trump would have been able to flip California. Not really a scenario that could have happened. We didn't have a lot of views about it that California could be flipped. But let's say California did got flipped in this election. Would have changed the outcome of the election? Yes. Because Donald Trump would have hit 1,600, leaving Joe Biden at 1,500, which means Trump would have done the presidency in 2024 and get another second term. A difference of just 1,000 votes. But again, as I'm just telling you, that does not mean that the difference is high. That doesn't mean it's a landslide election. Let's talk about Clinton. We just mentioned about it, that people did talk about Clinton not having wanting the popular vote was dropped off because of the electoral vote. In this scenario, would have not changed anything either. Donald Trump, based on this scenario, would have won the 2016 election by 6,320 electoral votes, still losing the popular vote, but would have won the election. Hillary Clinton, would have won 4,826 electoral votes and still lose the election to Donald Trump. Now, when you look at it, it's actually much closer to what Harris did, but it still is a loss. In this scenario also, again, if Texas gets flipped, Clinton would have exactly reached 5,800, which means she would have won the presidency, clinched 5,500, and would have been the first female president, while Trump would sit out on 5,300. I also put the actual result, 312, 226, and we can also look at how different they are, 86, 1700, 74 in 2020, 1500, 1400 in 2016, compared to 77, which was the actual difference. I also tried to do another interesting thing that caught my eye to see which state, now depending on what you did, how many electoral votes they would give, and what would be the top three and the bottom three based on the electoral votes that you just give them by the number of House of Representatives and 2 senators. The top three would be California with 1,320 electoral votes. That would be a boost just like it is right now at 54. Obviously, this will change in 2030. You will see a decrease in that number, and you're going to see a decrease in 54. That's currently California has. You're probably going to see addition to Texas and Florida, but Texas will be the second, behind California with 974 electoral votes. Florida will be third with 720 electoral votes. So they'll be our top three. California is the number one, still in the nation, 1,300. Texas will be barely 1,000. Barely's going to hit that number, but it's still below that number, and it would be the second highest. And then you have Florida, 720. Many people may talk about the states such as New York. You can look at how many New York will get in this scenario. New York will get 675. Still way below what Florida has, but close. Two people who I actually like, and I mentioned them in a previous video on Iran electoral votes, and I barely mentioned Mr. Beat in this video, are Logging Through History and Mr. Beat. Mr. Beat's state will be the state of Kansas, and in this scenario, Kansas would get 100, exactly 100 electoral votes in this kind of system. So Punkers would have won 100 electoral votes based on that. Ohio, which is the Logging Through History's home state, would have got 395 electoral votes. I also want to see another great historian state, which is Mr. Terry, and his state, Utah, would have got 111 electoral votes. Just famous people that I like and I follow, and it's interesting to see how many electoral votes their state would have had. At 295. I also tried to do the least state, the bottom three states. Excuse me. How many electoral votes they would have, and still be the lowest based on the population and what they have. I did mention to you before that this District of Columbia has 25, but it's not a state. So I'm not going to put District of Columbia in the bottom three. Even though it's 25, it typically has less electoral votes than Alaska. We are not going to include that. So the bottom three states, just like the top three states, will be one Democratic state and two Republican. There'll be Wyoming. Wyoming will be the least electoral vote holding state at 21 electoral votes. They'll be the least, even giving the 30,000 thresholds and still giving some representative based on their population. They'll be the least in the nation, awarding 21. Vermont will be the next, 23. I mean, as of the huge Democratic votes that comes in at the beginning of the election night, when you see the state being called, they have 23, and then the next state As I just mentioned, removing District of Columbia gives 25. The next state will be Alaska, 26. So 21, 23, and 26. Those are the least states that you have on. That's the state that you have that have the less electoral college votes, and the more will be California, Texas, and Florida. 13 country by California and going down. 7 countries. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any comments, you want to share how you think about this video, you want to see more state and all this map, definitely let me know. I will provide a link to the Excel file so you can also look at yourself and see what your home state actually has, what your home state is going to award electoral college at. For example,